A good way to work with the movement of the bouncing enemy is to look at the rolling enemy, because we're kind of going to make an extension here. So if you look at the rolling enemy, you can even take off some of the scripts we have here. You can even take off the game controller as well. You're going to see that we have a few variables that are going to be widely used. So we have the speed variable. We have the waiting duration, but that's not going to be the case for the bouncers. Then depth percentages might be used, not entirely necessary, but can be used. Horizontal range and depth range are mandatory here. And we're going to have moving left, but we're also going to have a moving up, okay, because we're going to move on 2 different degrees, on 2 different axes. Okay, no need for waiting timer. We're going to use frozen, so lots of things here are going to be used. So we're going to script enemies, and we're going to open the bouncing enemy. Alright, and let's start by using the speed, and depth percentage is not necessary. Okay, we're going to make this a bit different. So we're going to type here public float speed. Right, speed is going to be used. We're going to need depth range and horizontal range. So we can even copy these from here. Let's copy it from here and paste here. So private float depth range and private float horizontal range. We're also going to use these 2 properties, these 2 setters for the game to set what are the ranges for the bouncing enemy. We're also going to use moving left. So let's copy it from here and we're going to paste it here. And let's also make a private bool moving up. We're going to use both of those. Okay. Now, in the rolling enemy, when we start, we set a random position for it. So it's going to be either on the left or on the right. And we already set the moving left Boolean variable. So we're actually going to use those the same way. So we copy it from here and we paste in the start method. Okay. So start the bouncing enemy in a random place. Now horizontally, this is very important. Okay, it's going to be either on the left limit or in the right limit. And we also want to set it to be in a random place in the depth axis. Now this is going to be a bit different. Okay, in here we make the enemy start in either on the left or on the right limit. But what we can do with the depth axis is make it start in a random position. That is going to be between the minus depth limit and the maximum depth limit. So, for example, if the depth range is 8, we could make it start from minus 8 up to positive 8. So we can type here random.range. We can type minus depth range as the minimum value, and the maximum value is going to be depth range. So Unity is going to use this method to get a random value between both of these. Okay, so it's going to start in a random Z position. And this one is going to be just fine. Okay, let's use it like this. Now, we have moving left set to be one of those, with this logic, if we are on the right, we move to the left. If we are on the left, we move to the right. And as for moving up, let me put it below this line. Moving up is going to be more or less the same thing, but we're going to compare what we have in the z-axis. So transform.position.z. Then we're going to ask if this is lesser than 0. Okay, or instead of using moving up, we could use moving down, for example. It really depends on how you name these variables, but I chose to use left and up. So if moving up is only going to be true if the bouncing enemy is below the 0 line, for example. Okay, so we have both of these. Now, back to the rolling enemy, we also have this set values method, but we're going to look at this shortly. Okay, if you look at the set values, we only set the waiting timer, and then we set the position in the depth axis, but it's going to be a bit different here. We have to pay attention in the update method, because we have to make the enemy move. So, as you can see here, we access the rigid body of the rolling enemy, then we set its velocity to be a certain value. So let's try that. Okay, so make the enemy move. We're going to type here get component of type rigid body, then dot velocity equals to a new vector 3. Okay, let's start by just setting the velocity in the x-axis. As you see here, we just check if moving left is true. If it is, we use minus speed. If it isn't, we use positive speed. So you can paste this here. If we are moving left, we actually move to the left. If not, we move to the right. And let's keep let's keep y and z as they are right now. So we do it like this. We just get the value from the y component of the velocity and then the z component of that velocity inside the rigid body. Okay, so if we save this and go to Unity, we can wait for the compilation to be complete. And now if we press play, okay, let's see if everything's okay. If we press play, we have the enemy here. Okay, and unfortunately it spawned on top of the player, so let me move the player to a safe place. Okay, there's no problem to put it here. So if we press play, actually the bouncing enemy is bouncing, since it's on the top of the player, it's bouncing like that. So maybe we want to do something a bit different here. The issue is the bouncing enemy is going to be on the 0 position as well as the player, because we didn't set the horizontal range and the depth range. So let's go ahead and do this in the game controller. Okay, so scripts, game controller, and here we check for bouncers. We're going to type bouncing. We can even copy and paste things here. I'm going to copy these two lines for the rolling enemy object. I'm going to paste it here, and instead of rolling enemy object, I'm going to use bouncing enemy object like this. And instead of rolling enemy here, bouncing enemy. Since we already have the properties for depth range and horizontal range, it's going to work just fine. So let's save this and go to Unity. Let's wait just for a little bit more, and we can move the player back to the depth 0. And we're going to press play. And now we have the enemy in here, but if you look at the bouncing enemy, it has the speed set to 0. If we use 1, it's going to move to the right, okay, which is exactly as we figured it would work. Okay, so let's set the speed of it. Let's go to the prefabs folder, rolling enemy, actually bouncing enemy, and let's set it to 3. I think this is going to be interesting. Now, the issue is it's only moving in the horizontal axis, so there is actually something that we have to adjust here. Besides making it bounce from the left to the left and to the right, we need to make it move up and down, but there is a little issue here. Notice that we have a speed, but the speed needs to be different between the horizontal and the depth axis. Okay, let me illustrate that to you. So imagine the bouncing enemies here. Let's look from the top view. Okay, let's even look at it like this. Okay, so the bouncing enemy is going to move to the right. So it's going to have this angle, but that's never going to be the case here. We want to define an angle that the bouncing enemy is going to move, a minimum angle. So we could make it move like this, okay? Every time we bounce in either the left or the right limit, we're going to set an angle for it to move, okay? So it's going to bounce more or less kind of like this. And once it hits, it can change to another value like this. Okay, we're going to have to play a little bit with mathematics here. So what we need in the bouncing enemy is an angle. Okay, we need to define an angle for the bouncing enemy, so when it starts moving, we're going to use this angle. So this is not actually very simple to work, so we're going to move on to this in the next video.